000 to 045. April 10, 1941. The North African desert, a desolate expanse of rock and sand, shimmers under a relentless sun. But today, the heat is not the only thing that burns. The air vibrates with the distant rumble of German panzers, a sound that heralds the arrival of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps. They are closing in on Tobruk, a crucial port city on the Libyan coast. Inside its hastily reinforced perimeter, a mixed Allied garrison, predominantly the Australian 9th Division, braces for impact. The rapid Axis advance has pushed them here, a strategic choke point, 75 miles west of the Egyptian frontier. They are surrounded, outnumbered, and seemingly abandoned to their fate. Can a group of citizen soldiers, largely untested against Rommel's formidable war machine, hold a position that military strategists deem indefensible? Or will Tobruk become just another name swallowed by the desert sands? 045 to 3 o'clock. Lieutenant General Leslie Morshead, the commander of the 9th Australian Division, stands at the precipice of this unfolding drama. Born in Ballarat, Victoria, Australia, in 1889, Morshead is no career soldier in the traditional sense. Before the war, he built a successful business career with the Orient Steam Navigation Company, a world away from the harsh realities of desert warfare. His military experience, however, is extensive and hard-won. He fought with distinction in the First World War, landing at Gallipoli in April 1915 as a captain and later serving as a major at the brutal Battle of Lone Pine. He then commanded the 33rd Battalion on the Western Front, earning a reputation for calmness and exceptional organization, rising from a private to a battalion commander and receiving the Distinguished Service Order. Yet, despite his combat record, Morshead is a citizen soldier, not a product of elite military academies. He is known for his strict discipline and demanding nature, earning him the nickname, Ming the Merciless, among his troops, a reference to a villain from a popular comic strip. This insistence on high standards and relentless work ethic is sometimes perceived as bluntness, even with senior officers. As the 9th Division finds itself retreating across Libya, many in the British High Command harbor deep skepticism about the ability of these Commonwealth forces, particularly the Australians, to withstand the full might of Rommel's blitzkrieg tactics. The British forces in Cyrenaica have already suffered a devastating retreat, with key commanders like General Richard O'Connor and Lieutenant General Philip Neen captured by German motorcycle patrols on April 6, 1941. Morshead and his men are viewed by some as a temporary stopgap, destined to be overrun. The odds are stacked against them, and the world watches, expecting Tobruk to fall. 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock. The strategic importance of Tobruk cannot be overstated. It is the only deep-water port in eastern Libya, a critical logistical node in the vast, arid expanse of the North African campaign. For Rommel, capturing Tobruk is essential. Without it, his Afrika Korps faces an enormous logistical challenge, forced to transport supplies overland from Tripoli, a staggering 970 kilometers away, or from Benghazi, which is still 560 kilometers west of the Egyptian frontier. This extended supply line would significantly hamper any further advance towards the ultimate Axis objectives, the Suez Canal and the oil fields of the Middle East. The port itself is ringed by a formidable, though incomplete, defensive perimeter, originally constructed by the Italians. This perimeter stretches approximately 50 kilometers, incorporating a system of anti-tank ditches, barbed wire, and dugouts. However, the Allied forces, primarily the 9th Australian Division and the 18th Brigade of the 7th Australian Division, alongside British artillery and some Indian troops, find themselves in a desperate situation. They are exhausted from their rapid retreat across hundreds of miles of desert. They are outnumbered, facing a combined German-Italian force that possesses superior armor and overwhelming air support. British Commander-in-Chief General Archibald Wavell initially instructs Morshead to hold Tobruk for a mere 8 weeks, a temporary delay to allow for the reorganization of Allied forces further east. The implicit understanding is that the position is ultimately untenable. No one truly believes they can hold it against Rommel, whose blitzkrieg tactics have, until now, seemed unstoppable. The Desert Fox, as Rommel is known, has swept aside all opposition with remarkable speed and efficiency. The idea that a garrison, cut off and under-resourced, could halt such a force, appears almost ludicrous. But they are all wrong. Morshead possesses a resolve that few anticipate. He surveys the perimeter, the existing fortifications, and the determined, if weary, faces of his men. He knows the strategic value of this port, and he understands the psychological blow its loss would inflict. Addressing his principal officers, Morshead delivers a powerful statement that will define the coming months. There'll be no Dunkirk here. If we should have to get out, we shall fight our way out. There is to be no surrender and no retreat. It is a declaration of defiance, a refusal to accept the prevailing pessimism. Morshead makes it clear that their objective is not merely to survive, but to fight, to deny Rommel this vital prize, and to make the enemy pay dearly for every inch of ground. The siege is about to begin, and with it, a legend is about to be forged. 8:32:00. The morning of April 10, 1941, dawns with an ominous stillness, a brief respite before the storm. Rommel, convinced of a swift victory, makes the Suez Canal the ultimate objective of his Afrika Korps and issues orders that a breakout from Tobruk must be prevented. His forces are already in position, encircling the port. By this date, the Axis forces have effectively surrounded Tobruk, cutting off most road access. The 9th Australian Division, along with the 18th Brigade of the 7th Division and British and Indian support units, are now fully invested in the defence. The perimeter, reinforced with an extensive network of barbed wire and anti-tank ditches, stretches for roughly 50 kilometres. Inside this defensive ring, approximately 27,000 Allied troops prepare for the onslaught. On April 11, Good Friday, the siege officially commences. Rommel's forces initiate reconnaissance thrusts against the perimeter, testing the Allied defences with panzer and infantry units. These initial probes are met with resolute artillery fire, repelling the German and Italian advances. The 5th Panzer Regiment, part of the German 5th Light Division, attempts to penetrate the defences of the 20th Australian Brigade near the El Adem Road. Australian artillery holds the tanks at bay, and German infantry who manage to reach the anti-tank ditch are forced back by determined Australian infantry. The Germans are surprised by this staunch resistance, having perhaps underestimated the tenacity of the defenders. Rommel's immediate expectation of a swift victory begins to unravel. Morshead's command philosophy is clear from the outset: we should make no man's land our land. This is no passive defense. He instructs his troops to maintain aggressive patrolling and frequent raids, not only to gather intelligence and capture prisoners but also to disrupt enemy preparations and keep the Axis forces off balance. This constant harassment is a psychological weapon, steadily eroding enemy morale. The Australians, many of whom are independent by nature and accustomed to improvising, prove remarkably adept at this style of warfare. They venture out beyond the wire and the anti-tank ditch, often at night, relying on boldness, clear thinking, and a keen sense of direction. Some patrols go deep into enemy territory, observing Axis movements and positions for extended periods. The first major armored assault from the Axis is planned for the night of April 13–14, 1941, Easter Monday. Rommel, still confident, reportedly expresses to his wife, "Dear Lou, today may well see the end of the Battle of Tobruk." The attack begins after dark, with the 5th Light Division attempting to breach the anti-tank ditch west of the El Adem Road, in the sector held by the 217th Australian Battalion. The Australian defenders, however, are prepared. Their artillery fires into the advancing German tanks, while Australian infantry repels the accompanying German foot soldiers. The German tanks are engaged head-on by British artillery, forcing them to veer off, only to encounter British cruiser tanks waiting in hull-down positions. Caught in a crossfire, the Germans lose 16 of their 38 tanks in this engagement and are forced to retreat. The Australian infantry holds its ground, pinning down the German infantry. This engagement marks a significant moment. It is one of the first instances in the war where German panzer units are decisively stopped. The Axis attack overruns the perimeter defenses on a 4.8-kilometer front, reaching a maximum depth of 3.2 kilometers, and captures some higher ground. However, the cost is substantial for the Axis, with 650 German and 500 Italian casualties. In contrast, the garrison loses 26 men killed and 64 wounded, along with 2 tanks and a field gun. General Friedrich Paulus, sent by the German Army High Command to observe operations, is reportedly shocked by the casualties and the inhuman and intolerable conditions his troops are fighting under. He advises Rommel that capturing Tobruk appears unlikely. Morshead's tactical genius is evident in his instructions for dealing with tank penetrations. He orders his infantry not to directly engage the German tanks, but instead to focus on the enemy infantry following them. The tanks, he reasons, will be dealt with by his carefully positioned artillery and anti-tank guns. This innovative approach, unexpected by the Germans, contributes significantly to the failure of their April 14 assault. The Australian infantry, lying in wait on the flanks, allows the tanks to pass through the initial perimeter and into minefields, then moves in behind them with rifle fire and bayonets to engage the following German infantry and artillerymen. The desert environment itself becomes a formidable adversary. Scorching hot days and bitterly cold nights take a toll on the men. Dust storms, frequent and intense, make tactical coordination incredibly difficult for both sides. Despite these hardships, morale among the defenders remains remarkably high. The constant shelling and bombing from Axis aircraft, including Stuka dive bombers, force the troops to live largely underground in dugouts and caves, utilizing the existing Italian fortifications. It is this underground existence that gives rise to an unexpected badge of honor. William Joyce, the Nazi propagandist infamously known as Lord Ha Ha, broadcasts from Berlin, deriding the besieged men as living like rats in underground dugouts and caves. He contemptuously refers to the garrison as the rats of Tobruk. Far from being demoralized, the Australian soldiers embrace the insult, turning it into a defiant badge of pride. They even begin striking their own unofficial medals, shaped like a rat, from the metal of a downed German bomber. The rats of Tobruk are born, a symbol of their resilience and refusal to yield. By April 16, Rommel orchestrates another attack, this time from the west, involving the Italian 132nd Armored Division, WWII, reinforced by the 62nd Infantry Regiment. The 248th Australian Battalion launches a counterattack, capturing 803 prisoners. In the morning, the WWII division attacks again, with some tanks reaching advanced Australian posts. However, their infantry fails to follow, and after 5 tanks are knocked out, they retreat. Morshead seizes on this Axis disorganization and their difficulty in quickly digging in on the stony ground, ordering the garrison to exploit these weaknesses through continuous patrols and small sorties. He states, "I determined we should make no man's land our land," emphasizing the active and aggressive defense. This proactive stance keeps the enemy off balance and prevents them from effectively organizing further attacks. The Royal Navy and Royal Australian Navy play a crucial role in sustaining the garrison. Despite constant air attacks and the threat of U-boats, the Tobruk ferry service tirelessly delivers vital supplies, fresh troops, and evacuates the wounded, primarily under the cover of darkness. These ships, including Australian destroyers like HMAS Napier, Nizam, Stuart, Vendetta, and Voyager, make 139 trips at the height of the siege, covering an estimated 50,000 miles. The dangers are immense. The Allies ultimately lose 2 destroyers, 3 sloops, and 21 smaller vessels during the siege. Without this lifeline, Tobruk's defense would be impossible. Morshead's insistence on aggressive defense extends to every aspect of the garrison's operations. He ensures that every available asset is utilized in a combined arms effort, where well-supported light infantry works in conjunction with artillery and anti-tank guns to defeat the heavier armored force. The existing Italian defensive positions, including a main line known as the Red Line and a secondary Blue Line 3 miles behind it, are thoroughly integrated into the Australian strategy. Anti-tank mines are extensively deployed to funnel and contain armored penetrations. Artillery pieces are specifically positioned and sighted for an anti-tank role, compensating for the shortage of dedicated anti-tank guns. A mobile reserve of tanks, artillery, and anti-tank guns stands ready to reinforce any breaches. The constant pressure from the Axis forces is immense. Between April and the end of August 1941, the garrison endures 593 enemy air raids. The German Luftwaffe, with its Stuka dive bombers, attempts to pound the defenses into submission. However, British reports later indicate that dive bombing, on average, causes very little damage. The defenders, accustomed to life in their dugouts, learn to live with the perpetual threat from the air and the constant artillery barrages. As April draws to a close, Rommel plans another large-scale assault, a do or die operation, FTER receiving panzer reinforcements. On April 30, 1941, at 6:30 p.m., the Afrika Korps launches its heaviest attack to date on the southwestern corner of the perimeter. Stukas and artillery pound the Allied positions, while panzers and grenadier units surge forward. Despite intelligence warnings, the Germans manage to gain a toehold, pushing 2 miles inside the perimeter. This creates a dangerous salient, a deep penetration into the defensive lines. The fighting is fierce and costly for both sides. The Axis attack, supported by the fresh 15th Panzer Division, is ultimately repulsed, but the Germans retain their 2-mile deep salient near Fort Palestrino for the remainder of the siege. This engagement is Rommel's most costly attack so far, with the Afrika Korps losing over 1,000 men. General Paulus, still observing, reinforces his earlier assessment: there is no chance of capturing Tobruk. The Australians' aggressive patrolling continues to be a defining characteristic of the defence. They dominate the nighttime, no man's land, with dozens, sometimes hundreds, of men out in various sectors. These are not just reconnaissance patrols. Many are hard-hitting fighting patrols, sometimes mounted in machine-gun-equipped tracked carriers. The objective is always to keep the enemy guessing, to deny them rest, and to prevent them from organizing effective attacks. This ceaseless activity, often involving small groups of soldiers, even pairs and individuals, forces the Axis to expend considerable resources on their own security and disrupts their offensive preparations. Morshead's leadership inspires a fierce loyalty and determination among his troops. He is reputed to have said, in response to a propaganda article titled, "Tobruk can take it, we're not here to take it, we're here to give it." This ethos permeates the garrison. The conditions are brutal: stifling heat, constant dust, dwindling supplies of food and water, and plagues of flies, fleas, and illness. Yet, the rats dig in deeper, turning the Italian-built network of caves and dugouts into a resilient fortress. They prove that a determined, well-led infantry force, even when outnumbered and outgunned in terms of heavy armor, can successfully defend against a modern, mechanized army employing blitzkrieg tactics. The siege of Tobruk becomes the first time in the war that the German panzer units are brought to a halt. 32:0038:00. The air hangs heavy, thick with the acrid scent of cordite and the fine, pervasive dust of the desert. It is the early hours of May 4, 1941, and the German forces are making one last, desperate push to break the Tobruk perimeter. Rommel, frustrated by the tenacious defense, has committed significant resources to this renewed assault, focusing on the salient they established days earlier. The roar of German engines grows louder, a guttural symphony of destruction. Panzer IVs, their long barrels spitting fire, lead the charge, followed closely by Italian M1340s tanks, their smaller frames a stark contrast to the German behemoths. Along the perimeter, the Australian defenders of the 224th Battalion, eyes gritty with sand and fatigue, peer through the gloom. They have spent days enduring relentless shelling and air attacks, their nerves frayed but their resolve unbroken. The ground trembles beneath their feet as the Axis tanks roll forward, their treads churning the desert floor. Flares arc into the pre-dawn sky, momentarily illuminating the grotesque landscape, revealing the ghostly outlines of advancing German infantry, their rifles held ready. The Australian artillery, meticulously pre-sighted, opens fire with a deafening roar. Shells scream through the air, impacting with devastating accuracy. The coordinated barrage creates a wall of explosions, throwing sand and metal skyward. Several German tanks falter, then burst into flames, their silhouettes stark against the burgeoning dawn. But still, they come. The sheer weight of the Axis assault threatens to overwhelm the defenders. A section of the perimeter, already weakened from previous engagements, begins to buckle. German infantry, yelling orders and war cries, surge through a gap, seeking to exploit the momentary confusion. They believe they have found their breakthrough. But Morshead's doctrine is absolute. Hold the line, no retreat, no surrender. In the thick of the fighting, an Australian platoon commander, Lieutenant John Edmondson, sees his forward positions being overrun. With incredible courage, he rallies his men, shouting above the din of battle. He leads a small group in a ferocious counterattack, engaging the German infantry with bayonets and grenades. The hand-to-hand fighting is brutal, desperate. Every Australian soldier, from the youngest private to the most seasoned veteran, knows what is at stake. The fight for Tobruk is not just for a port. It is a battle for morale, for the very idea that Rommel can be stopped. The Axis forces, despite their initial gains, find themselves bogged down. The terrain, combined with the fierce, close-quarters resistance, prevents their tanks from maneuvering effectively. Australian anti-tank gunners, hidden in well-camouflaged positions, pick off the enemy armor one by one. The infantry, following Morshead's orders, allows some tanks to pass, then turns its concentrated fire on the exposed German and Italian foot soldiers, cutting them down with machine gun and rifle fire. Hours crawl by, each minute an eternity of combat. The sun rises higher, baking the battlefield, turning the dust to a suffocating haze. Rommel, observing the battle from a distance, watches in disbelief as his blitzkrieg falters once more. The Australians, despite being outnumbered, refuse to break. Their aggressive defense, their constant counterattacks, and their unyielding spirit stem the tide. By late morning, the Axis assault loses its momentum. Rommel, facing mounting casualties and exhausted troops, issues the order to halt the offensive. The attack has failed. The salient remains, a painful reminder of the penetration, but the port of Tobruk holds. The do or die operation has not achieved its objective. The cost for the Afrika Korps is high, with over 1,000 men lost in this single engagement. 38:00 end. The siege of Tobruk, beginning on April 10, 1941, and lasting for 231 days until its relief on December 10, 1941, became a pivotal moment in the North African campaign and indeed, in the Second World War. The tenacious defense by the predominantly Australian garrison, under the indomitable leadership of Lieutenant General Leslie Morshead, achieved what many believed impossible. It halted the seemingly unstoppable advance of Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps. Tobruk's strategic importance meant its capture was essential for Rommel to continue his thrust towards the Suez Canal. By denying him this crucial deep-water port, the defenders forced the Axis to rely on an incredibly long and vulnerable overland supply route from Tripoli, stretching 970 kilometers across the harsh desert. This logistical strain significantly hampered Rommel's operations and bought invaluable time for the Allies to regroup and reinforce their positions further east in Egypt. The siege diverted a substantial portion of Rommel's forces, pinning them down for months and preventing their deployment elsewhere. Leslie Morshead emerged from Tobruk as one of the most renowned Australian divisional commanders of the war. His reputation as a tough disciplinarian, Ming the Merciless, was balanced by the deep respect he earned from his men for his capable leadership and his unwavering commitment to their welfare. His innovative and aggressive defensive tactics, emphasizing continuous patrolling and counter-attacks, surprised the Germans and proved highly effective against their mechanized forces. He instilled in his troops the belief that, "There'll be no Dunkirk here," and, "We're not here to take it, we're here to give it." This fighting spirit transformed a desperate holding action into a symbol of Allied resilience. The "Rats of Tobruk," nickname, initially a German propaganda slur, was proudly adopted by the Australian, British, Indian, Polish, and Czechoslovakian defenders, becoming a lasting emblem of their courage and defiance. Their story resonated globally, demonstrating that the Blitzkrieg was not invincible. For a world reeling from Axis victories, Tobruk offered a much-needed morale boost, a testament to the power of determined resistance. The human cost was significant. From April 8 to October 25, the 9th Australian Division alone suffered 749 killed, 1,996 wounded, and 604 taken prisoner. The total losses for the 9th Division and attached troops from March 1 to December 15 amounted to 832 killed, 2,177 wounded, and 941 prisoners. Yet, their sacrifice was not in vain. The siege bought crucial time, tying up Rommel's forces and protecting Egypt, ultimately contributing to the eventual Allied victory in North Africa. Morshead's leadership at Tobruk cemented his place in history, and the Rats became synonymous with an enduring spirit of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Their story is a powerful reminder that even in the bleakest moments, courage and unwavering resolve can alter the course of history. If this story moved you, subscribe. New forgotten stories every week. Which moment surprised you most? Comment below.